for the coming school year. And for the performing arts section, we have OSCE, which is happening tomorrow. It's a senior comedy show that is put on by the Theater 3 class, and it also includes an award ceremony at the end where the Theater 3 class designed these awards in order to commend some of our fellow students. Along with that, the marching band will be playing at the Memorial Day Parade, so check them out. And the Theater 2 class is presenting a class play called The Chronicles of Jane, Book 7 on Thursday, June 9th, and it is free of admission. And then FHSTC ends the year with a senior-directed one-act play called The Play That Goes Wrong, directed by Joseph Maple on June 10th and June 11th at 7 p.m. and 2 p.m.
So hi everyone, my name is Nipan Coyle. I'm the senior class president at Franklin High School, and just continuing on with some more school-wide updates. Specifically in the sports field, the regular season is coming to an end for most of FHS's sports teams. Playoffs will start in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for those schedules. Come out to support our teams. We've been doing really great, and specifically a shout out to both our boys and girls lacrosse teams, as well as our baseball team. They all won the Hockomock League, another title this year. Franklin, of course, remaining that prestige we have for being such a great sports school. So great job to them. In the academics field, 11 students earned the Seal of Biliteracy for Massachusetts, which will be displayed on their diploma. That kind of depicts their proficiency in English as well as another language. So congratulations to them. It's not an easy task at all, and congratulations. And finally, for some more senior class specific stuff, as Kenzie touched upon, our last day of classes was yesterday. So we are officially done with classes. It's a great celebration. There's still a lot to be celebrated for the senior class. We have senior week celebrations next week after Memorial Day. Specifically next Tuesday, the whole class will have a senior night boat cruise in Boston for a dinner cruise. Then the following day, we will be going out to Kimball Farm out in Westford for a nice day of fun ice cream and activities. And then on Thursday, the day before graduation, we'll have a senior breakfast and another graduation rehearsal, followed by the big event on Friday, which is graduation, of course, held outside on the football field. So we encourage you all to come and support the senior class. And once more, this is our last meeting, Mackenzie and mine, and we just want to give a thank you to everyone who gave us the opportunity to show up to meetings this year, inform the community about what's going on at the high school, school committee for listening to us, showing out to events, showing their support, Superintendent Dr. Ahern, Dr. Jagir. So thank you to all of you guys. We really appreciate it. And that's it from us. Thank you.
Thank you both so very much. I know that we quickly spoke before, so I don't want to embarrass you, but you guys are really just a ray of light in our meetings, and we really appreciate all that you've done over the past 2 years. So thank you very much, and good luck after high school with whatever you do. So thank you again.
Thanks so much.
And I get out of here. Go enjoy.
Are we swimming too tonight?
I know, you guys go in the pool too?
I have to find the dress for boat cruise.
Oh,
Last
exciting.
minute things.
Yeah, figure that out.
Thank you so much.
All right, Dr. Ahern, superintendent's report. Good luck following that.
Right. That happens every meeting. Couple of updates for the committee and the community this evening. The first one comes out of the Office of Teaching and Learning. A couple of weeks ago in another report, I had shared with you how Dr. Tina Rogers had secured some grant funding through the Department of Education to support middle school science materials. That was put together by some of our science, the recommendation was put together by our middle school science teachers. And we've also had the fortune of having some funds from, I guess, last year at this time to support illustrative math in the elementary schools. Dr. Rogers has secured additional funding from the Department actually, I don't think it's from the department, from the 1-8 Foundation. The other is through the Department of Education to support roughly $30,000 in grant funding to implement some supplemental math materials, including something called ST Math. It includes building-based professional development to support teachers throughout the year. ST Math is a standards-aligned digital tool that teaches foundational concepts visually. It eliminates the barrier of language. All students can tackle unfamiliar math problems, recognize patterns, and develop conceptual understanding. Students receive instant visual feedback as they progress through their own personalized journey. We've talked a lot about how we can better personalize learning for students and meet them where they are and bring them along. It can be used in a variety of ways in the classroom and pairs well with illustrative math. So that 1-8 Foundation grant supports it at Parmenter, Keller, and Oak. But we have some additional funding through an acceleration mathematics instruction grant through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in the amount of $70,000. It will support equitable learning for all K-5 students, as a portion of this grant will fund ST Math at Jefferson and Kennedy. So it will go to all 5 schools. And the remaining balance will pay for a portion of next year's illustrative math renewal. So thank you to Dr. Rogers for additional work on her part to secure grant funding to support curricular needs. Other budget update information, the Senate Ways and Means Committee released their proposal on May 10th, so just 2 weeks ago. It's similar in many ways to the House Ways and Means budget that was talked about a month ago, in that it fully implements the second year of a 6-year phase-in of the Student Opportunity Act. Chapter 70 for minimum aid districts like Franklin is based on an additional $60 per pupil instead of the $30 per pupil originally in the Student Opportunities Act. The statute for the SOA does cap inflation at a formula of 4.5%. MASS, which is the professional organization for superintendents, as well as others, are advocating for an increase and that the formula get based, although I don't know that that will happen, on an increased amount for inflation. The Senate Ways and Means budget also funds special education circuit breaker higher than what the governor's budget had, although it falls a little short of the House proposal. Charter tuition reimbursement to the town would increase, and the assessment to the town also increases in this Senate budget. The Senate proposal does not include funding universal school breakfast that the House budget had proposed. The Senate is debating the proposal and will finalize this month, and then the House and Senate budgets get reconciled until the final state budget is published. So that's just an update of where we are in terms of the state budget. I think the good news is that I think it's a little earlier than we have often seen. Sometimes the Senate budget hasn't come out until July. So in a recent report, I had shared with you that Mrs. McMurray had received a grant from the Franklin Cultural District, which is also being supported by the elementary PCCs and music boosters. And Amaya Dance and Drum will be presenting an African dance and percussion group to all elementary schools in early June. We are a partner with the Franklin Cultural District and also wish to share that there will be a community-based presentation of Amaya on June 11th at 1 p.m. I'm not 100% sure of the location. I want to take a moment to highlight all of the amazing lifelong learning offerings that are coming up in the summer. We've done a lot of regroup emails, and the early discount for those programs that have a discount is May 31st. But before I do that, it has come to my attention that the week of April 19th through 23rd is After School Professionals Appreciation Week. And I've used this platform to talk about other appreciation weeks and recognitions we have for teachers and school nurses and school lunch heroes. And wanted to make sure that I give a shout out because I've been remiss to not point this out in recent years, how much we acknowledge and appreciate the lifelong learning faculty and staff. They provide a wealth of enrichment opportunities and much needed before and after school care for our students. They are aligned with our school and district efforts, providing seamless continuation of educational care before and after the school day, as well as during vacation periods. We are so fortunate to have such a dedicated staff, and we appreciate especially the strong relationships that they make with students and families. So please join me this week in appreciating the staff of the Lifelong Learning Institute. To highlight what's going on this summer in the Lifelong Learning Institute, families may be interested in the Preparing for College series in terms of writing a college essay and Common App boot camp. There's a wealth of arts opportunities, including photography and video production, plenty of science opportunities through the STEM Academy for students who are inclined to think about things like forensic science, zoology. There's also financial literacy for teens, which I know is something that comes up very, very often as desirable among families. There's arts and crafts, and I could go on and on, not to mention summer music program and music lessons. So encourage folks to check that out in the early signups end on May 31st. And then lastly, wanted to fill the committee and the community on administrative positions. We have been making our way through and filling a number of positions and have made some announcements recently. And then I can tell you a status update on some that are still open. So we've filled 9, although 2 are still pending formal announcements. We have a new athletic director with Kara Ellis. Tom Houle has resigned and will take a new job as food services director in Air Shirley, and Colin Boisvert will be returning to Franklin Public Schools. Amy Harvey will be the new assistant principal at Parmenter, as Tanya has departed and relocated her family. Just recently announced Stephanie Wasik will be returning to the district as the principal of Jefferson. The interim positions for principal and assistant principal had been filled a couple months ago. The interim lifelong learning director position has been made permanent with Patty Gay filling that role going forward. We have hired an art director, Adam Gooder. Superintendent Lucas Jagier has been named. And although I'm not prepared to share the name just yet, we're still finalizing some details. We have a finalist for the assistant director of special education position in the Office of Student Services. So pending at this time, we have active searches going for 2 assistant principal positions at Keller. We wish Jesse Craddock well as he takes on a principalship in Hanover and a new position in the FY23 budget. Ms. Klim, who's here with us tonight, and Ms. Wasik are collaborating on a search process for the assistant principal at Jefferson. I know Lucas has been planning for posting and filling the assistant superintendent vacancy that his appointment leaves. And the director of curriculum for ELA and social studies is a finalist in a few searches in other districts, but it would be too early to say that there's any vacancy there. But that is public information, so I thought I should put it on the list. And we have the DEI director process is wrapping up. So those are the updates on the administrative positions at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ahern. Any questions, comments from the committee? Camille? Dave?
Yeah, 2, I can throw them out
Yep,
both
go
at
ahead.
once. All right, great. You talked about a lot of the grant writing, some great work by Dr. Rogers, also by Mrs. Mack. Do we kind of typically track year over year how much funding we're able to get through the grant writing process?
Yes, I'm sure we do through the business administrator's office. Yes, we do.
Okay, terrific. Would I be able to, at a later time, kind of request that just to be able to kind of see historically kind of where we're at, how much funding? All right, because I know we kind of talked about this, I don't think it was all that long ago. It felt like forever during the budget season. And obviously that's a fantastic, just additional source of revenue. So Dr. Ahern, thank you so much just for constantly kind of highlighting any time that teachers and faculty are able to utilize those outside revenue sources. And would you be able to provide us, I know a lot of members of the community have received emails about updates following the Sharon baseball incident. Would you just be able to kind of recap what has been done since we met last?
Sure. So I did begin that school committee meeting acknowledging that we had a report that fans, Franklin fans at the home Franklin Sharon baseball game had been cheering inappropriately, extremely inappropriately, and the report included slurs and derogatory comments in the direction of two of the Sharon baseball players. So at the time of the last school committee meeting, there was an active investigation on the part of the high school administrators. We also were in close communication with the Sharon community, superintendent to superintendent, principal to principal, the coaches, the athletic directors, in order to launch or conduct the investigation and find out more information, as well as to provide support and understand to the impact that the Sharon community was feeling, as well as it affected members of the Franklin community too. And so I want to be sure that we acknowledge that. By the end of the week, they had concluded the investigation and had determined some facts of the case. And based on the facts in the case, had identified responsible parties and then applied appropriate consequences to the school as written to the school code of conduct and to the school handbook. And we've talked, I think, plenty of times about what possible range of consequences those might be, including education. We have been in touch with the Anti-Defamation League, and we've also been in touch with another organization, I think it's called Stand With Us, to receive some additional resources that we're evaluating. Anti-Semitism in particular, in my time in Franklin in 5 years, I think has been one of the largest areas in terms of the number of and the number of incidents and public incidents. When I came in that spring, there had been 3 swastikas on school buildings. So we're looking at some of these resources and some of the programming, the Stand With Us programming that was very, very interesting. Paula, Lucas, Josh Hanna, and myself met with a representative from that organization for more education in the high school community. And we've also, we're looking to bring in for our younger students, even though this was something that happened in our high school population, we are also looking to bring in the Anti-Defamation League's K-5 resources for support for our elementary students. So I think I covered the bases there, but we did issue a kind of closure letter to the community to identify where the actions that we had taken. And I guess lastly, I would also say we have increased the level of supervision with police presence at all of our night games for the rest of the spring, and additional administrative presence.
Thank you very much. I know when this happened last time, I think many of us kind of commended just a swift response, but I think it's really kind of expounding on it. And I think the educational piece to, from K to 12 is so important and valuable. So thank you very much for the recap.
You're welcome. I think there's one thing that that we didn't put in the letter, but I could also add to is without all of the facts and all of the information, it may appear that this was happening the entire game, which I think would be really unfortunate for that to be sort of the narrative for Franklin, with the idea of why didn't anybody intervene or intercede, and that it was just sort of happening the whole time. And what I would say is it kind of escalated to that point. And so I don't want anybody to have the impression that this was happening all throughout. And I think that's an additional detail that I can feel comfortable sharing with you.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah.
No questions.
None. Thank you for the updates.
Megan?
No questions for me. Thank you for the updates.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hearn.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving right along to guest presentations. We have our first one, retiree recognition.
Yes, it's a very exciting evening, and we've got a full house here in council chambers. We're joined by a couple of principals who are prepared to share a few remarks about the retirees who are retiring from their buildings. And for those who couldn't make it, Lucas will share some remarks for some other folks. We have 19 individuals retiring this year, and a number of them are here in the audience. We also have a few folks joining us, and I think we can promote them to panelists so they can participate a little bit virtually, but we did invite people to participate in that regard. And Lucas will be working to bring those folks in. Just saw Joanne McNeil, but I'm not sure where. There she is.
Promote. Is that Christine?
Nope. So let's see. I actually. Joanne McNeil, Ben Rizzolo, and is Eileen Gazakis?
Let's see.
Okay. So we're going to proceed alphabetically, and I'll ask Ms. Klim to join for remarks related to Jefferson. To be somewhat alphabetical. So our first retiree that we're recognizing is Kim Booth.
Good evening. Kim Booth has been the assistant principal at Jefferson for the last 5 years after a career that started in the business world. She then became a classroom and special ed teacher and team chair in other districts before finding her way to Franklin. And we have been lucky to have her guidance and her compassion as we have navigated some challenging situations the last several years. Kim is in front of the school each morning to greet the kids, rain or shine, warm or cold. I'm inside because I don't like to be wet. Her smile and greeting starts many a child's day off on the right foot. When problems arise, she takes time to listen, ask questions, and get all perspectives before determining the next course of action. I call Kim the parent whisperer because she has a way of speaking with parents who are worried and concerned that puts them at ease and helps them know she is their ally, wanting to work with them to do what is best for their child. I have truly been fortunate to work alongside Kim. She makes me laugh, gives me a hug on the tough days, and looks out for my well-being when I sometimes forget to do it myself. She's the epitome of generosity, and her caring nature and infectious laugh will be missed next year by the students, families, and staff. Thank you, Kim, for always having my back and for all you have done for the staff, the families, and especially for the kids.
You can take yours maybe after we do. Next, we have retiring from the Oak Street Elementary School, Mary Doherty.
I go this way. Back to the camera, but face the star. Actually, Mary just told me she's not retiring. So. Good?
Great.
All right. Miss Mary Doherty has been an integral part of the Oak Street community for the past 35 years. She's been committed to the youth of this community, spending the majority of her time as a fifth grade teacher. Mrs. Doherty has high expectations for all students and requires them to give their best effort. And any student has been in her class will tell you that they know that she believes in them. They may also tell you that she has an infectious laugh. Is it okay to say infectious? Her sense of humor make learning fun for fifth graders. Mrs. Doherty's classroom is a place where 10 and 11 years prepare for middle school by working hard, but still have the opportunity to be kids. When I first met Mrs. Doherty, she explained the highlight of the year at Oak Street is a Memorial Day concert, where fifth graders recite the Gettysburg Address. It is a tradition that students remember and understand the importance of because of the way they are taught. I learned this again on Friday afternoon when I approached an Oak Street school bus that had broken down. The students on the bus were noisy, and as I approached, I was ready to remind them to quiet down and be calm. But when I got a little closer, I noticed it was actually the fifth graders making the noise. They were rehearsing the Gettysburg Address on a school bus on a Friday in May. And the rest of the students were listening with their eyes wide. So it's with all sincerity that I borrow a couple of lines from Abraham Lincoln. The world will little note nor long remember what I say here, but it can never forget what Mrs. Doherty did here. Thank you.
Okay, next we have two retirees from Franklin High School, and we'll start with the first. And Mr. Jagir is going to say a few words about Sandy Gaudette.
Mrs. Gaudette, I am so excited to have the opportunity to do this. And I'm going to, on behalf of Principal Hannah, I'm up here sharing this, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't think about all of the folks, including many of our police officers who are grown men and women now on the force. You've fed a lot of people over this time. So you began your career in 1989 in the Franklin High Snack Bar. We think about Sandy and we wish her much health, good health in retirement. And your commitment has been felt over the last 30 years for Franklin Public Schools. Your cooking and customer service skills will be missed. Her pizza and calzones, if folks don't know, she is responsible for making them from scratch in the cafeteria and serving our students. She will be missed, and those calzones will certainly be missed along the way. We've always appreciated your great sense of humor, your connection with kids through the years, and I've seen that over decades. We just make great connections with kids, no matter what age and where they're at. And we just want to thank you for creating such a safe and healthy environment for our kids and serving well over thousands of students over that time. So it's really an honor to wish you a happy retirement. And thank you for your service to Franklin Public Schools. Okay, I don't know what you were all doing on a nice warm afternoon in 1975, but Carol was beginning her career at Franklin Public Schools as a cafeteria worker and server. She has served tirelessly over 40 years in our cafeteria. When I think of the students that have come through, who she's made smile, fed, made feel comfortable, and just once again created that warmth. I know from my own experience working there, I might not have been a young child, but a child at heart, and just felt the love coming through there. Felt like my mom was in the line. It was a good check-in for me midday. Often needed that as an assistant principal over there. And I just want to thank you for all of the nutritious meals you provided. You transitioned to the new high school, really looking at taking on a whole new skill set and the technology and what was expected of folks at that time. That was a change and it was a challenge. And she really led her peers in taking that challenge on and adapting so that our kids were fed and they knew what to expect when they showed up every day. So I think about what we try to do. We talk about social emotional learning, but it certainly extends to all the staff that connect in front face and connect with kids. And you were certainly one of those folks that we could rely on to create a safe environment. And we just want to thank you and wish you the best in your retirement as well.
It's Carol Gillespie. Okay, next from the Keller Elementary School, we congratulate Marilyn Johnson on her retirement.
For the past 20 years, Marilyn Johnson has served Franklin Public Schools as an education and support professional. Over the years, she has worked hard to meet the needs of all students. In 2011, Marilyn began working as a crossing guard too. Since then, every morning and afternoon, Marilyn has been keeping students and families safe from her post along Lincoln Street. I am so pleased to announce that next week, the Massachusetts Safe Routes to School program will help us celebrate Marilyn. They'll be visiting our school and honoring her with a Crossing Guard Champion Award. I'm also proud to share that last year I began a tradition at Keller School of handing out keys to our school. Don't worry, they're not real. But they're intended to serve as a token of our appreciation for our best friends that journey on from our school, and hope they serve as a reminder that as a friend, you're always welcomed and have a place here at home in Franklin. So next week, we also look forward to sharing the key to our school with you. On behalf of the entire Keller School community, Marilyn, I wish you good health and happiness as you retire to the Cape and enjoy time with your children and grandchildren. Enjoy.
Joanne McNeil is in the audience, and if we could promote her to a panelist, we would love to congratulate her. Great.
Joanne, put your camera on. Come on. Dr. McNeil, also known as Miss Joanne at ECDC, has worked as the district physical therapist in Franklin for many years. During this time, Dr. McNeil has proven herself as a strong advocate for inclusion and independence for each of the many students on her caseload. Dr. McNeil believed that each and every one of her students could do hard things, and she found playful ways to support, encourage, and challenge her students to do just that. Dr. McNeil also was committed to supporting students through important transitional periods in their educational journey. She worked with students and families to be sure that, for example, one preschooler was ready to physically access the big yellow bus for kindergarten, and another preschooler attend kindergarten that was able to meet their physical needs. In another instance, a child used a motorized scooter in school, and she worked with the team, the child, and the family to increase their independence, strength, and stamina. As Dr. McNeil enters her retirement, she should be proud that she had left a legacy of high expectations for each and every student to be fully included and connected, no matter their physical disability. Best of luck, Joanne.
Thank you.
Best wishes, Joanne. Also with us this evening is Christine Rebello, and Sarah Clem has a few remarks from Jefferson.
Christine Rebello has been an ESP in Franklin for about the last 15 years. Christine gives 100% to her students every day, from the time she greets them in the morning until she walks them out the door in the afternoon. She's kind, caring, nurturing, and very patient. She is a wonderful friend and colleague with a great sense of humor and a generosity of spirit that always shines through. I've witnessed Chris sitting and comforting a crying child with endless compassion and then running a race with that child at recess to keep them smiling and engaged. I don't think she won the race though. Chris will most definitely be missed by the students and staff next year, and we're so very grateful for her many years of dedicated service to the children of Franklin. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, joining us virtually is Lynn Rizzolo, and Eric Stark, principal of Keller, is here to say a few remarks.
For the past 25 years, Lynn Rizzolo has served the Franklin Public Schools as a classroom teacher. Lynn has worked at Oak Street and Keller Elementary Schools. Students and staff and their families love Lynn. As a resident of Franklin, she's connected with students outside of school, and her students always look forward to seeing her in the community. Lynn has also served on several district-wide committees and had a tremendous impact on the town. On behalf of the entire Keller School community, Lynn, I wish you good health and happiness as you retire. and hope you enjoy well-deserved time with your new grandbaby.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Also joining us this evening is Kathleen Roberts, who is retiring from Oak Street.
So it'll be okay. Kathleen Roberts has dedicated the last 27 years to the students of the Franklin Public Schools. She has supported instruction as an ESP in several buildings over this time and was the assistant director of the STAR program for years, organizing summer programs, including Ready, Set, Kindergarten. This is where I first met Mrs. Roberts. She was outside with a hose and a large blow-up pool, making our littlest students' day. We've been fortunate to have Kathleen Roberts at Oak Street for the past decade. Mrs. Roberts is caring, flexible, hardworking teacher who has excelled at everything she does with our children. She is a unique individual who can connect with students of all ages. She is the Oak Street Swiss Army knife. Few adults have had her ability to connect with and inspire students ranging from ages 5 to 11, and Mrs. Roberts thrives in these settings. She loves to get her steps in, and on any given day, you turn your head and there she is. One moment helping a kindergartner do a puzzle, the next taking a third grader for a movement break. Well, maybe multiple movement breaks. And then turn around again and see her sitting alongside a fifth grader to help her edit a written response. She has done so much for our school. Thank you, Ms. Roberts, for all you have done. You will be missed. We wish you all the best.
And our last retiree recognition of the evening, I think also has a Ready, Set, K connection, and that is Deb Rinteroth, and Sarah has a few remarks to share from Jefferson.
Debbie Winteroth has been teaching in Franklin since 2000, but her distinguished career began earlier than that in California. Debbie has a wealth of knowledge and experience that she brings to her classroom every day. She is a true believer in the power of play for children and hands-on learning and discovering things for oneself and the value of the outdoors. Over the years, Debbie has stepped up to take on many other roles and projects within our school, including writing grants to the FEF for multicultural literature for her classroom, organizing and promoting our Memorial Day celebration each year to make sure that kids understand it's not just a long weekend. And she also wrote a grant for garden barrels so our first graders could have the experience of planting and growing their own vegetables and flowers, thus earning her the nickname of Farmer Deb. She's also been our Mary Poppins, our Mona Lisa, and many other characters in our reading skits over the years. You cannot spend time in her room without coming to know two inherent truths. Practice makes better and better, and we're not better, we're not worse, we're just different. The children who have had the good fortune of being a student in Mrs. Winteroth's class are well prepared for the next grade level and beyond. Thank you, Debbie, for your dedication to your craft and your school, your care and compassion for your students, and your friendship to your colleagues.
And that concludes our formal recognition. We sometimes do photos. We take a little break for photos so as to not disrupt the flow.
Comment and then we'll
Absolutely.
take a recess. Okay.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to say, we are so fortunate to have had such wonderful individuals serving our community, our students, our families. The bright light within our schools are created by individuals such as yourselves. You know, our teachers, our staff, support personnel, cafeteria workers, nurses, our bus and van drivers, admins, coaches, and secretaries. Do not ever forget how much you have mattered to your students. They will always remember how you've made them feel. The job of educators is very powerful, and your reach extends further than you will ever know. On behalf of the school committee, please accept our heartfelt gratitude for a job well done. May your next chapter in your life be filled with joy, new adventures, and some well-deserved rest. You mattered. Thank you very much. We're going to break for a very quick recess and we'll take some photos and we'll be right back.
Recording stopped.
Turn everything.
Recording in progress.
We're good to go. All right. I call to order the May 24th school committee meeting. Thank you, everyone, for allowing us to take a brief recess. All right, so 7:52, we'll go ahead with the next on guest presentations, district improvement plan update. Dr. Ahern?
Sure, thank you. I'm going to move over there. I think that will be easiest. We've got an update related to the district improvement plan, and Tina Rogers and Linda Ashley are joining us virtually, and so Lucas will promote them to be panelists. And I'm going to invite my central office colleagues to chime in with remarks as we go through this. Thanks. As we customarily do, we are providing the school committee and the community with an update on our 4 strategic objectives. We had a variety of initiatives this year, and this is our update to you on selected areas. We used to break this down into discrete presentations on each goal, but it can be a little long, and I think we've gotten to the point where we're seeing a lot of continuity and continuation in the work. And I want to thank the central office administrators, the building principals and assistant principals, as well as our faculty and staff, all of whom make this happen. And we'll continue the presentation. So back in 2018, the team with the school committee at the time identified 4 strategic objectives. 1, focusing on the social emotional well-being of students and staff. The 2nd, on an engaging and rigorous curriculum. The 3rd, providing high quality instruction to meet the academic and social emotional needs of each learner, and effective 2-way communication to support student learning. Our theory of action has been something that we've come back to over the years, nurturing a safe, supportive, inclusive, and collaborative learning environment. Focusing on the rigorous curriculum with exemplary instructional practices, and engaging our community, then we will develop the necessary skills within our students. And this all culminates with the portrait of a graduate, and our graduates building through their pre-K through 12 experiences, the skills that were outlined in the community's consensus. So some updates for you on the work this year. The first area related to social emotional well-being. We continued the implementation of recommendations from the counseling review. In part, this included some very specific professional development for counseling staff. The example here is providing them with professional development in supporting LGBTQIA+ youth, which was provided through the Department of Education. We continued and strengthened community partnerships. That was an area that was highlighted as a strength when we had the counseling review several years ago, and something that Franklin was, I think, uniquely positioned to leverage based on the resources that we have in our community and the relationships that have been built. And so this year we expanded a partnership, as you know, with the Wellesley Centers for Women, who brought in a team of clinicians to do additional mental health screening in grades 8 and 10. We will be debriefing with them in a few weeks to understand a little bit more from a pattern perspective of the outcomes of that screening. But I have heard that there has been an opportunity to identify students who are struggling that may not have been on our radar screen. And so getting them the support that they need. Supporting these initiatives, I think, comes in terms of putting the right resources in place. And so in FY22, we added a counselor at Oak Street Elementary School, maybe in Jefferson as well. It's not listed here, but we also added an additional counselor at Jefferson. And as you know, through grant funding, we have 2 counselors and ESPs planned for a very tailored and specific program, the BRIGHT program, in FY23. And we have been, especially post-pandemic, looking to implement strategies to improve staff professional well-being. I would like to give credit to Lucas and Tina and Linda and Paula on the administrative side, as well as our partners with the Franklin Educators Association in bringing together the PD committee to meet regularly during the 21-22 school year, providing input and feedback on something that I think is and ought to be really meaningful to everybody, which is professional development. The team also expanding choice and voice in PD, expanding staff communication through a quarterly newsletter, and expanded sharing of resources to support difficult conversations. The example here, Learning for Justice and the Anti-Defamation League. I do know that Paula has prepared, for example, in quick and short order, communication to go out this evening in support of families and faculty and staff related to how to talk to children about violence, gun violence and school violence. Would you like to
Just
elaborate?
to chime in, the PD committee met 3 times this year. Earlier in the year, you may remember we talked about the feedback from staff around some of the voice and choice options and how that made its way into our professional development opportunities. So we continued. We had a meeting last week that Dr. Rogers and Dr. Ashley had planned, and then we all participated in facilitating. We have some really good information to move forward with. So those check-ins and collaboration have certainly been helpful for us as we continue to plan. The Painter's Palette, the digital learning newsletter, it's listed in here for well-being. There are parts of the newsletters that are put out that provide staff with not only technical tips, but also other topics that are covered to try to help them have an easier way to navigate technology or to navigate the school day and whatnot. So there's always some positive pieces that come out of that as well. So that's why it landed in that particular area.
The updates that you're seeing here are not limited to what we're sharing from kind of the district standpoint. There are also kind of school-based efforts and school-based actions that have taken place. And I think particularly in the area of faculty and staff well-being, I think principals and assistant principals and the faculty and staff themselves own a lot of that at the building level. And I think it really came out tonight when we saw the deep and close connections that are fostered. I'm going to have Lucas and Paula talk to this slide related to continued implementation of our community-based committees.
This year, as you know, we've launched 2 critical conversations, which are community engagement efforts. The committee that puts that together is a community-based committee. As you know, the Substance Abuse Task Force and the School Wellness Advisory Councils are made up of stakeholders from throughout the community, where it's either a parent or guardian, educators, administrators. We have school committee representation as well to try to move these efforts forward. So the first, we were proud of the work that we were able to accomplish in those areas. And the first was on mental health, if you remember, and substance abuse, which was a November focus. And then later in the spring, we focused more on the impacts of social media. And we had Georgia Wells from the Wall Street Journal come in and facilitate. So there's a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around what is the next topic and how do we continue to use this theme to meet our community where we're at and try to move some of that messaging forward. As far as anything else to add on that one, Paula?
Nope, I think you hit it. We're looking forward to, I'm having word finding, having more critical conversations next year. And we're going to tie that work with some educational aspects that we having with students so that the students are getting the education as well as the families in the community. So we're looking forward to that and engaging more stakeholders and parents on really getting to know what they want to hear about and how we can hopefully get some more people to attend as well.
Good point. Good point. Aligning like school-based topics that are discussed and pairing that with the parent evening so that we're all talking the same language on some of these ideas. Thank you. And for the School Wellness Advisory Council, same composition of stakeholders, but this year, as you know, and you'll see, we finalized our policy, and next year it's putting policy into action. And Miriam, anything else to add on that as far as the wellness coaching model? We'll enter year 2.
Yeah, no, I think the committee has done some good work on the policy, and I'm looking forward to next year and implementation work with the coach as well.
Thank you. And I think this is the last slide for Strategic Initiative 1. And this talks a lot about our efforts towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we're actively in the process of recruiting a director. There has been continued opportunities for faculty and staff to engage in PD related to Speak Up at School, which is around interrupting microaggressions. We are in the midst of an equity audit with PCG as our consulting group with a projected completion for June of 2022, although we're working through the final draft right now. So the intention was to conclude that at the end of the year. We reaffirmed our commitment to a World of Difference peer leader program. So after a couple of years of a hiatus through the pandemic, the Anti-Defamation League returned to the trainings that we've been used to. And so we had middle school students participating and high school students participating somewhere around mid-year. And then the 8th grade peer leaders started to go into classrooms to implement the anti-bias education for their 6th grade peers. And one of the things that's really interesting is in listening to some of the high school students this year, they had talked about the impact of that program. And I guess we're sad to hear that it was on hiatus for 2 years and wondered where it went. But we had shared with the pandemic that it was difficult to continue, but that we reaffirmed the commitment this year because they did speak to a positive impact and positive outcome as a result of that program. We established resource groups, with a DEI director to support students at middle school and high school to help elicit student voice and help them have discussions around bias-related matters. We provided an update to both you as a committee as well as the town council and the community on our DEI efforts in February and March. You saw in our handbooks a shift towards restorative justice and response to student behaviors, tiered response to student behaviors in May. And we're proudly including a unified basketball team representing Massachusetts in the Special Olympics is something worth noting as a highlight. But I would also add too, there are things here that we couldn't have planned for, but came up as opportunities during the year, and we do look like we are expanding to middle school, and we had a very brief middle school unified basketball season. And doesn't get a lot of notoriety, but we have unified music.
Unified
music too.
And unified track, who's going to States tomorrow?
Yes. Yeah. So there's much more to celebrate in terms of that level of inclusion. The DEI committee continues to do its work. We've got 2 more meetings, and these are some of the products that people are working on in their subcommittees, including a calendar for awareness of holidays and months and days of recognition. So some awareness campaign. Revising the registration process to make it more inclusive, especially for families for whom English is not their primary language. Providing guidance on reducing bias in hiring practices. We've pushed out some quick PD for brief topics that principals can use in faculty meetings. Providing educators with guidance on reducing bias when selecting curriculum materials. Providing educators with support on inclusive practices, and celebrating diversity with Project Brain Check, which is an arts project that's been kind of happening at the high school and will be displayed across Franklin this summer. So these are some of the outcomes that we're anticipating to come to fruition over the next couple of meetings. I think the challenge will then be implementation and pacing all of this out. There's a lot of support and a lot of resources, and so pacing this out for folks. But the idea is that there's some small chunks that can be kind of repeatedly built into a pattern or a habit over time. Our second goal around engaging in rigorous curriculum includes some of our work to develop guaranteed and viable curriculum units aligned to our Portrait of a Graduate. PD and development was a concentrated area of focus on high school early release days this year. Josh Hanna had talked a lot about incorporating SEL and DEI into curriculum units. I am going to invite Tina and Linda to take on some of these other additional bullet points under guaranteed and viable curriculum units, and I'll first hand it over to Tina.
Hi there. Sorry we can't be there in person with you all, but we appreciate you letting us join via Zoom. So this next bullet here, the illustrative mathematics implementation in elementary schools. We spent a lot of time. Educators have worked extremely hard all year. We have offered professional development for teachers. We also were able to secure participation in an alpha pilot to support our math specialists at the elementary level to better equip them to facilitate ongoing professional development during common planning time for elementary school teachers. So that's been happening all year behind the scenes, which is some pretty incredible work. Also connected to math at the elementary level, we were able to do a virtual family night and receive some valuable input from families. Via a survey. We also put out a teacher survey connected to the math implementation and are using that data to really drive forward our curriculum improvement. So just as kind of a couple small examples of that work, it's really being used to drive our future PD planning for elementary school teachers connected to illustrative math, some of which is actually happening June 2nd, Paula, I think, or June 6th?
That is correct. June 2nd.
We're bringing some folks in from IM to do some professional development with some groups before the end of the school year. And then it is also driving a lot of the summer curriculum work that's happening. All those survey results were really kind of thoughtfully poured through to drive that work. And then I think do you want me to just jump down to the science piece and then I can turn it over to you, Linda, on that last bullet there under the viable curriculum units. As Dr. Ahern had mentioned, we were able to secure the grants for the middle school science. I would say that our science committee unanimously voted to kind of move forward after a kind of a thoughtful evaluation process. We did some site visits to another school district using the Open SciEd. We also had panelists visit from 3 different school districts in the Commonwealth to share their experiences with the curriculum resource with the entire middle school teaching staff. And we're really excited about this opportunity and what it brings forward for our students. We've also have some incredible educators, I have to say, and 100% of our middle school teachers are attending summer professional development connected to our implementation and rollout of our new middle school science curriculum. And the few that cannot attend in the summer are attending in the fall. So everybody will be kind of starting with the same understanding and support as we enter the school year. And what we really loved about this particular curriculum, aside from kind of it stands for, providing high quality curriculum resources and access to all students, no matter the zip code you live in. What we really, really appreciated was the thoughtful implementation plan, that this is really a 3-year implementation plan, because so often we kind of jump really quickly because we want to do what's best for students in the moment. And so we're jumping in, but we're just being thoughtful and planful about making this a guaranteed and viable curriculum experience moving forward. So I think, Linda, I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Thank you, Tina. In the area of ELA, we're getting started with setting up a pre-K to 12 literacy ELA review for next year. So we're looking forward to getting a posting up before the end of the year to really start a district literacy leadership team, which will not only work with the consultants and teachers in the district next year to really look at our ELA curriculum across the district, look at our instructional models, look at our curriculum and materials, but also so that team will help guide that work and be kind of a steering committee next year. And then all buildings will be represented and all grade levels will be represented. So that will really serve the district well moving into the future, really to be that literacy team that can come together during any program implementations or any professional development needs. So having that district literacy team will be really critical for the future. And also for planning professional development, we're looking at pre-K to 5 science of reading, which is foundational reading skills, and starting the year with professional development for teachers in that area. So it's really going to be exciting work at ELA next year. In the area of high school social studies, the high school social studies department has been very invested. We've taken a lot of their department meeting time. So I want to thank department head Kevin McCarthy and the team this year. We really dug in. We're looking to purchase new textbooks through capital funds for world history and U.S. history. For grades 9 through 11. So it's quite many students will be using these materials. So we take this, it takes this purchase very seriously, and we take a lot of responsibility to make the right decision. So we used a really a rigorous evaluation process. There's evaluation processes through the Department of Ed and other high quality resources to really use a really comprehensive rubric. So we looked at we started out with 4 publishers, narrowed them down pretty quickly to 3. So we looked at Houghton Mifflin, McGraw-Hill, and Savas Learning, which was the old, which is Pearson, but they were bought. So Savas might not be a publisher people are familiar with, but it's kind of the new Pearson. So we narrowed it down and teachers piloted. We met pretty much monthly. We used a really comprehensive rubric. So we looked for multiple areas to make sure we were selecting really high quality curriculum that will meet the needs of all students at Franklin High School for many years to come. So this would be for textbooks, hardcover textbooks, for class sets, and also for digital resources for the next 6 years. And then we would, the district would continue that digital subscription after that. We looked at criteria such as making sure diverse perspectives and voices and narratives, as you know, very important to make sure that's all taken into consideration in the text and the resources. We really look for that inquiry-based instructional approach. Looking for student engagement, looking for appreciation of other cultures and students' cultures, their own cultures, and also support for teachers within the professional development, also with the teachers' manuals about how to, for sensitive topics, politically sensitive, other sensitive topics that teachers are really asking for support in this in kind of the charged climate that we find ourselves. Social studies teachers sometimes are on the front lines for those conversations. So the text that were selected really does a nice job with that. We really wanted to look for something to promote civil discourse, really helping kids have the conversations, encourage honest, respectful discussions. People can have different views, but really how to look at primary sources, discuss things in a really civilized and understanding multiple points of view. We want to make sure that the text, the resources are cognitively demanding, but also included resources for our English language learners, our children with special needs. So the resource that we chose has different reading levels embedded. So there might be a text, but it has the same content, the same subject area, but multiple reading levels. There's also, you can click on vocabulary words and text, and it translates it automatically into multiple different languages. So it's quite amazing, the resources. So we had a big reveal party last week. So after much rigorous evaluation, it was pretty overwhelming that we're going with Savas Learning for Pearson, and we're really excited about that.
Great. Thank you, Linda and Tina. Linda and Tina have also been working, and they can share a little bit more about this. But as an administrative team, we've been working to establish a draft curriculum review cycle. And I know that they're planning on kind of polishing that up this summer. But it would be kind of a way to formalize curriculum planning, make it be a little bit more predictable. Right now, it's been a little reactive to two things. One might be changes from the Department of Education. The other might be our subscription is up. We need to think about materials. So this would be a much more deliberative process to get into a regular review cycle of particular content areas. Tina and Linda, do you want to add any more to that?
So I guess what I would just kind of highlight additionally would be the idea of how we're using backwards design throughout this process. So really, when we're talking about curriculum revision process, we want to make sure, as Dr. Hearn mentioned, that we have we're planful, that we're evaluating, we're looking for feedback, we're implementing, we're reflecting on an ongoing basis, but really using kind of this understanding by design approach, and that we have kind of the end in mind, right? That we're planning in a thoughtful way to ensure that all of our students have a guaranteed viable learning experience, that we're developing curriculum units with kind of thoughtful, thought-provoking questions that run across course-alike partnerships, that run across grade levels, so that all of our students have similar experiences, and the outcomes of whether it be the course or the grade level expectations are the same no matter what teacher you have, no matter what course you go to. So we're kind of keeping that in our minds as we develop a curriculum revision process. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, Linda.
I will just add that like a typical curriculum review process might look at a content area every 6 years or so, typically along the lines of how long a subscription series might last with particular materials. It's not hard and fast, but that is what I've kind of seen. It also will help, I think, make capital requests a little bit more predictable too, in terms of spacing out various capital requests with the town for curriculum resources. I think it's sometimes helpful to think about backwards design in terms of what it's not, or what curriculum planning used to be like. A lot of curriculum planning used to be activity driven, activity based. I'm going to do this today, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and then I'll give an assessment. But backwards design, as Tina had mentioned, begins with the end in mind. So you're thinking about what student outcomes are you looking to achieve through the standards, and through and you kind of parse through the standards to determine what knowledge and skills are going to be required for students to be successful. Then you plan the assessment. What is the evidence that they are going to produce, whether it's a traditional assessment or maybe a project, and then the learning experiences get tailored towards what that evidence is. And so it's really turning curriculum planning backwards from what it had been, which was kind of activity driven, but less purposeful. But the idea is to have a guaranteed and viable curriculum that is equitable, while also leaving room for educators to exercise professional judgment. They know the students in their classroom, so that is also at play, particularly when we think about the instructional components of that unit design. To support the curricular area, you need resources to help support that, and we're grateful to the school committee for recognizing that. And in this year's budget, we have 2 directors of curriculum in specific content areas, and I think the value is being seen in terms of the focus that they are each able to give, which is needed at this time. You'll see with the curriculum review cycle, there's limits in terms of capacity, in terms of what you can reasonably look at in any given year. And then they saw, and I agree with, kind of a void in curriculum leadership at the middle school. This is not to take away anything from those individuals who are stipended teachers who are supporting department needs within each building, but they teach full time. And so in order to have a written guaranteed curriculum, we appreciate the support of 2 teacher leaders at the middle level. The third area is around high quality instruction to meet the SEL and academic needs of each learner. I would really love to invite Tina and Linda to talk about NWEA. This has been a major area of focus for them. The MAP, NWEA MAP assessment. This has been a major area of focus for them this year. And whether it's screening or being used as a progress monitoring tool, it kind of forms the basis for not all, but a decent amount of understanding of where student skills are. So Tina and Linda can talk a little bit about that.
Or I can start us off if you want. So we feel very fortunate to have this assessment tool across all schools K-8. And so ultimately students took assessments in the fall, winter, and spring. And we had an implementation plan that we pulled together this past summer and followed throughout the year, and really tried to think very strategically about not putting too much on students and staff at one time. And so how did we kind of slowly implement giving the assessment and analyzing the data of assessment? And so we started by inviting the folks from NWEA in to give a little virtual PD. And then Linda and I started to take a bit of ownership of that and doing some work with our curriculum leaders and building administrators and developing some professional development that was really focused on Franklin's needs. And so we looked at specific reports and gave some collaborative planning time, gave some professional development about what does the data mean, and then gave some collaboration time to really thoughtfully, analyze that data. Tandemly with that, supporting our curriculum leaders and building principles and developing protocols and structures to kind of analyze and talk about data. How are we going to use it? What does this data mean? And how are we going to thoughtfully use it? And we really wanted to kind of have that plan throughout this whole year and this professional development so that we, at the end of this year, understand what the data says and how we can use that data to impact learning. And then goals moving forward is really, how can we, now that we have a bit of a better understanding about what this has to offer as a benchmarking tool, what are the other progress monitoring tools that we might be able to pull into play? And then also, how do we communicate that with both families and students and bring them into the conversation about goal setting and things of that nature? And so thinking through how that support and professional development continues moving forward.
And I'll just add that we're just really proud of our curriculum leaders, middle school, our math and literacy specialists at the elementary school, because it's been it's been a big initiative, but we were very careful and planful because we knew this was going to be a lot of data, a lot of assessment. So we really want to thank just all the educators, K-8, for their patience and their perseverance. And we're really starting to be able to just to get through that first year, but they're really starting to be able to use the data and figure out, okay, what's going on with these kiddos and how to really start thinking about the interventions that will match the, some weaker skill areas. And really, that's really at stage 2, as Tina said, how we're going to use the data. But they've done a great job just during PLC meetings, common planning times, the department meetings is really digging in to the data and figuring out, okay, how can each different subject area on different grade levels utilize the data to really move instruction ahead.
Thank you. The data has been instrumental and helpful in terms of providing targeted literacy and math interventions, and we introduced that at all 5 elementary schools this year as we returned to full and in-person learning, kind of following disrupted learning in the pandemic. Along those same lines, I wanted to be sure this wasn't part of the district improvement plan per se when we set out in the fall, but do want to recognize that Title I has been expanded to the Keller Elementary School, and that's kind of something new and noteworthy. Not new to the folks that joined from DT, but new to Keller, and so wanted to point that out specifically. Lucas and Paula, similar to NWEA now, we've been working with DESA for some time, but have more recently expanded to all of our schools, and that is something that we want to highlight.
Let Paula provide some detail, but just big picture, we talk about MTSS. In order to have a strong system, you need to have this type of assessment data. So you heard the academic side with literacy and math, and looking for benchmark assessments that occur 3 times per year. On the other side of that coin, the behavioral SEL side, you have the DESA that we're using K through 5, and we're using that data. So our goal in setting the stage for that really positions us well as we continue to plan moving forward and roll out future plans, is to look at that information and how can we tie that to future goals that we have throughout the year. And then we have this as a monitoring platform that we can use on both ends of kind of that, if you're thinking of the pyramid with academics and behavior, trying to structure everything with that in mind. I'll let Paula talk a little bit about DESA, but we're just really proud that we were able to get all 5 of our elementary schools on board. There's a transition when you first roll it out, calibration, because it's a teacher rated assessment. You need to make sure that people feel comfortable to do the ratings and unpack that. So we kicked the year off and then picked up in the second of 3 assessments with the new schools to bring them on board. But the other schools have been working at it for a few years and developed great tools. If you may recall, a few years ago, it was like the so now what? We've done the assessments. We have this great information. We have kind of this wild west of resources. How can we funnel it? That was about the time we were doing the competency of the month. And we're going to look to revisit that next year. But the schools that were on board are able to assist the schools that were just starting out this year with like, okay, if you're finding that students struggle with social awareness, here are like 3 things you can embed into a warm up, into a classroom discussion. Here are some other tools. So we've tried to like create a pathway to point to resources.
I really don't have much more to add. You pretty much summed that up really well.
Sorry, I thought it was big picture.
That's okay. That's all right. But yes, as Lucas said, it's administered 3 times a year. We start with the mini DESA, and then based on those ratings, some students are flagged where we have to do a full scale DESA, which is a little bit longer. And then the SEL support teams, I guess you want to call them, really look at that data and figure out what, based on that data, what interventions need to take place, whether that's tier 1 interventions at the classroom level or some tier 2 interventions where counselors will pull some small groups within the classroom, or tier 3 where they get pulled out for individual support. We also do a similar assessment called the EDECA at the preschool level with that same idea. We're looking at those rating scales and determining what are the strengths of students in regards to SEL, as well as the areas of growth and need. And yeah. Panorama, yes. At the middle school level, we are implementing Panorama, which is a SEL-based tool. It's a survey that students take, and we use that data also to provide supports, as well as this year the SBIRT, we re-implemented the SBIRT. It was on hiatus for a while due to the pandemic, so that is a screening that's done in grades 7 and 9. Yes, 7 and 9. And that was completed at the 3 middle schools. And in the first week of June, it'll be completed at the high school in grades 9. And then as Sarah already alluded to earlier, we brought in the Wellesley Center for Women to expand our Signs of Suicide program, as well as we did it in our health classes as well in the other grade levels. And we looked to expand that, as well as the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey. So we're taking all of this data and really trying to figure out where our students are at, what needs they have, and how we can program to meet those needs.
Just to break down the acronym SBIRT, it's a screening tool that's meant to be very quick and really focuses on screening students for safety, substance use, things like that. And you may have seen the letters come home. If you're a parent of a middle schooler or a high schooler, you would have received those. It's an optional screener, but certainly wanted to just break down the stands for screening, brief intervention, and referral.
I know, I was trying to think of the acronym.
Referral and treatment, so.
Yeah. I will share SBIRT is might be considered an underfunded mandate.
Correct.
It is optional for families. You can opt your child out of SBIRT screening, but it is a requirement for districts to do. It came into play maybe 5 or 6 years ago or so. There was an allocation for the initial training that came from the Department of Health and Human Services or the Department of Public Health, I can't remember. But no ongoing funding and support for that. So just take that moment. I don't like to belabor funded or underfunded mandates, but that's one. Also in the area of instruction is a strengthening of digital learning. And so, we don't have, I actually was reflecting on this, we don't have COVID written anywhere on the district improvement plan update. However, we did still find ourselves, kind of responding to the ways in which the pandemic has influenced education. One is this idea of multi-tiered systems of supports, which was in place pre-pandemic, but pointing out a greater need to have those tiered systems of supports and shoring up our practices there. And then also the disruption related to technology and instructional technology in the classroom. And Lucas has been working with the DLIs on the digital learning plan.
And you'll see that this fall. Be one of the first things we present. But the digital learning integrationists have been working really hard to help us continue to sustain the high level of instruction using some of these tools. We've also put a fine eye towards which programs and software need to continue because they support teachers today in classes, and which were really a benefit to us in a virtual environment or a hybrid environment, to try to really be fiscally responsible about what needs to continue. And we've had those discussions, and the staff have been great around providing some feedback and either finding alternatives that are free that can meet that need, but certainly trying to keep a close eye on that. The management of that has certainly been an undertaking. I think the positives with learning to teach in a virtual environment or a hybrid environment and carry some of those tools means continued support, and those student data privacy pieces involved with that, and really just trying to leverage the technology that we have. Anything that we purchase that a teacher is expected to use or a student is expected to use, we expect to support that. So the touch views were installed this year, 289, I think was the number, if I might be wrong there, but touch views across K-8 in our district. And that required one day you're a teacher, you get the email, hey, tomorrow you're going to have a new piece of technology in there. So what do you have to do before that? And the digital learning integrationists held voluntary meetings after school, did demos so that it wasn't a complete shock and surprise. And then once the day happened, they were coming in early to make sure that they were there to greet the staff members who had the new, because it was rolled out in a real scheduled way, so that when you walked in your room and you were going to have 23 kids come in, walking into your room in 20 minutes, you had at least a moment with someone who knew how to use that system. So that's one of those things that maybe sounds very small, but if you're a teacher, if you've been a teacher and you know that those kids are coming in your room having a technology issues, can certainly create an undue stress, and they work really hard to help support our staff. So.
Thank you. And the last slide, I think, related to instruction, kind of specifies specific resources and personnel that we've brought on board within the past 2 years, again, with an eye towards increased personalized learning and inclusive practices. So that includes the transition coordinator at the high school. We're adding additional English language development educators. We did in the FY22 and FY23 budget to support a growing population there. DLIs that you just heard about. Continuing to make sure that we're supporting, at least from a financial perspective, staffing for our specialized programs from teachers as well as paraprofessionals. We have had some trouble fully staffing paraprofessionals, and we've pulled out all stops to have paraprofessionals brought on board, including consulting with several agencies this year to staff paraprofessionals in the district. And I think we're faring better than some of our colleagues, and adding Wilson language educator for elementary schools in FY23. We did add one, actually, now that I think about it, at Remington Middle School. We did this current year, so it's not on the slide, but again, trying to make sure that we're providing very specific resources to target specific student needs. Again, with the idea that there's more neurodiversity and there's more diverse needs among our student population. Again, I've said it before, we're not alone in that regard. It's a trend that other districts are experiencing too. And lastly, effective two-way communication. We continued to work through the Human Resources Department around enhancing recruitment and employee services. A small group of us participated in a DESE-sponsored professional learning community on diversifying the educator workforce. We've incorporated some DEI language into recruitment and job postings. And there is currently a compensation and class study for non-administrative, non-union personnel. So a lot of folks in this building, some of our secretaries, people in the financial office, the town is also participating in that in order to examine those roles and compensation. We continue to strengthen and grow community partnerships. Those are some of the partnerships that we have. Should put Franklin Cultural District on there too, and Wellesley Centers for Women. We had an initiative starting out the year to begin and communicate master facilities planning process. So from our perspective in the central office, we've supported your subcommittee, the Space Needs Subcommittee that has met several times this spring. And they are planning a presentation to the full committee and the community at your next meeting. We'll probably talk a little bit more about that in new business. Communicating the long-term budget forecast with the Franklin community. So we continue to issue budget communications in collaboration with the marketing and communication specialist. You have seen our one-page budget flyer and the budget poster that she had put together. There's been several newsletter articles. There's a staff newsletter article too related to the budget book, and did a couple of radio shows with Franklin Matters. And then expanding two-way communication with faculty and staff. We instituted a quarterly newsletter. We looked at doing a mid-year survey, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in my evidence. We had the PD committee. I held several coffees with the superintendent and central office staff. One initiative that had been on the table, but I pulled back on it mid-year, was doing the superintendent's roundtable. Which would have been a group of educators to get together and serve as an advisory committee. My predecessor had done that, and it had met during the day, and was something I was looking forward to. When we had challenges getting substitutes, kind of felt that needed to put a pause on that. Didn't feel that I could really pull people out of school, and it didn't also hearing people's worries about think what a difficult year it was, didn't want to add something after school either. So just kind of put pause, but that is talked about in my individual evidence as well. So I think that brings us to the end of our updates for you on our 4 goal areas and the initiatives from this year. We would be happy to take your comments or questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahern. Camille.
No questions. Thank you.
Dave Callahan.
First, thank you very much for the presentation. I said one piece of clarification. It was talking with the strategic initiative, the first one, with the expansion with the Wellesley Center. Was that funding from our operating budget? Was that the program that was Senate President Spilka was able to acquire?
Yeah, so last year in the state budget, Senate President Spilka put aside money for her districts to do additional mental health supports. And it could look a variety of ways. We applied it and it covered nearly the full amount. We applied it towards this additional mental health screening. And this year, JV Helen and I wrote a legislative advocacy letter asking for earmarks again, and I haven't heard, but we did ask for continued support for that in the future.
Okay, terrific. Yeah, because that's a fantastic program if we're able to continue through. So thank you very much. I appreciate that point of clarification.
Yeah.
So thank you for the work. It shows how thoughtful you've been covering
not just our students, but the staff as well, and really touching all levels just to make sure that we are really touching them and caring for them. The question that I had though was around the curriculum review cycle. I know that we're working on that plan, but like, what does the time look like once that to review curriculum and get that updated and implemented?
Tina and Linda, do you want to jump in on that? I'd be happy to share, but you've been closer.
Sure. Can I ask you to repeat the question that kind of?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So I guess once you begin the review process for curriculum, what's that time look like? How long does it take to review and get that updated?
That's a good question. So it could vary, but typically what will happen is once you have the various curriculum areas identified, when those curriculum revisions will happen during which year, you're typically looking, if you're looking at like your review process, you review curriculum for a year. So that would be when your committee would form, you would potentially pilot different resources. You would use a rubric, as Linda kind of spoke to before. The committee would then make a decision on which resource to move forward with. But the cycle doesn't really kind of end there. That might be the saying that this is what we're putting forth for an ask for a capital expenditure. But then your review cycle, if you, I think Dr. Hearn had mentioned, typically it's a 6-year revision cycle. So within each year of that revision cycle, what you'll typically see is a different kind of part of the process. So for example, after you evaluate and make a decision, then your next year would be your implementation year. So this would be where a lot of time around professional development would be spent. And then the next year would be around gathering some more feedback around what's necessary, what other professional development or supplemental resources might be necessary to enrich the tier 1 resource that you might be adopting. And then you'd be reflecting. So there's different points in that 6-year process. So you're never really done with one curriculum area in 1 year. It's just that kind of heavy lift of the evaluation to then adopt happens in a year, the heavy professional development, and then there's a lot of kind of reflection and planning, and that moves forward throughout the remaining year.
It's also a self-study phase where you look at what you're currently doing and try to look at, does the curriculum that we're teaching and does this meet the needs of our learners currently? The DEI lens, depending on the course, SEL lens, really trying to make sure that are we meeting the frameworks at a very basic level? So that self-study is really an opportunity to look at that. Then look at instruction. Are instructional practices aligned, like Dr. Hearn mentioned, to meet the goals? Do the instructional practices and do they allow students to demonstrate those skills that we expect them to know? So as part of a multi-year, and it's also respectful to teachers who teach multiple subject areas. If you're in a reactive state, you could find yourself having to, like an elementary teacher, look at a science curriculum and a math curriculum in the same year. So with a staggered curriculum cycle, you're able to pace this out so that the lifting is more predictable and can lead to better outcomes. And then the piloting and recommending of a resource after you've done some self-studying gets much clearer on the direction that you need to move. So I just would add that as another component.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for this update. It's great to see the things that are being done at the school level that are in line with our district goals. So thank you for that. Just a couple of brief questions. What has been the most impactful social emotional learning initiative during pandemic learning?
I'm curious to hear what my colleagues in central office think. I have my own opinion, but I'm curious.
Okay. I actually pulled our principals who know, I think, who are experts on what's actually happening in the buildings. I think overwhelmingly it was the implementing EDECA and DESA and Panorama surveys across, the surveys and the social emotional progress assessments. I think finding out really where our students were. I think initially when the pandemic, when we came back full and in person, I think the priority of connecting with students and families was really impactful, as well as supporting our families during the pandemic. Whole school meetings have now been able to be implemented again, where they're really focusing on the core values of the schools and the core competencies for SEL. They're looking at, mindfulness, as well as movement breaks and mystery readers and whatnot. I think advisory at the middle school level has really focusing on the individual topics in the small group. And now they're asking for student input of what they want next year. So I think that's been very impactful. And at the high school, it was really getting all the teams and the clubs back running again, so they could build those relationships, have those social connections. And it gave moments for students to look forward to many things. So I think, when masks came off, you heard Josh Hanna a few weeks ago, when masks came off, that was a huge thing as well. So I really think, that's what I heard.
It was a much better answer than, I think, much more specific answer than what I would have given. I guess I want to give credit where credit is due, and that is to the entire district in terms of SEL. We had, as part of the counseling review going back 4 years, just tremendous accolades and commendations around the strength of our SEL, not just programming and practices, but mindset around social and emotional learning. And I think that mindset really set the stage for, and there are some kind of new things that came through with the assessments, but set the stage. I just think our educators have that mindset and recognize that it's important, both for the whole child and the child's well-being, but also too for academics, that it's reinforcing in terms of academic growth.
The idea of a new initiative, really what was interesting to me is it's getting back to some solid practices that we were missing so sorely. And we've heard from our community and our families and our teachers around connection. Was probably the greatest.
Thank you. I mean, the mindset that you touched upon, Sarah, I think that's so important that we have that as a cultural component of Franklin Public Schools, that we are truly learning and how we can best meet students where they're needed. And I think, to your point, the survey is not like an extra component of that. So thank you for that update. And then just one more question. Do you think there's a strategic initiative that will be particularly important in the coming school year, and why?
So I think what I would say, and would also invite Lucas to chime in, as I sort of reflect and think about departing, is this was and always has been a pretty ambitious list. And so focusing on the initiatives that are here and deepening them and improving upon them without too many add-ons. I think from the committee's perspective, one of the things that's not on here, and sometimes that's happened where we have a district improvement plan and then things sort of get added a little bit after the fact, like school start times was never part of the district improvement plan, but then took up a lot of time when we got to the school start time study, would be just recognizing and acknowledging within the area of communications, how much is going to need to be communicated out and planned for with respect to the master facilities planning process. I think that's something that is an area that's going to need to be augmented in the coming year and in the big policy piece. So I wouldn't want to short sell that. That's my take.
My take would be, I said this in a previous meeting with you all, is just recommitting to our systems of how we proactively teach kids. I think I'll use an example, behavioral systems, how we act and treat each other in school, how we respond when that's not being adhered to, what's the process for that, and then it ties in with communication around what can we forward face for families. I think after talking to principals all week around a few that we're already thinking for next year and planning and starting to think about these systems and how we can make them better, but really trying to hone in on the work we have this summer to really try to reset and then recommunicate out expectations in those areas and provide families. That's just one example. of a system. You heard us talk a little bit about the academic and the SEL component to that work and how that might look. And we just covered a few slides on that as well. That would be a second area. And with that, I think when I say the word systems, it's really evaluating all of our resources and looking at how we can meet the goals and really setting some goals that we need to be protective of. If we're going to be really honed in on specific areas and really dedicated to moving the work forward in curriculum review or student behavior or advisory or whatever the areas are, being clear and upfront at the beginning of the year on what we intend to do, so that when we have this meeting next year, it's kind of known what we're reporting out on and the progress we made using the screening tools we've had. And to Sarah's point around, some things can take over and not be on that plan. And I think to the degree that I can in the role that that I hope to be taking on will be to really protect that to the degree, but we can't protect something if we don't communicate what we are doing. So that would just be that's my long-winded answer, but really committing to systems and goals and having a real clear plan of how we're going to get it done. And if it means it's a multi-year process, what does it look like in future years so that it's clear as possible? And I'm proud of the work that we're all doing and the transition between Sarah and me and then the team and thinking about how that will look.
Thank you, Bill.
Elise?
No questions, just a comment. I think that all these details we've sort of heard a little bit about here and there in various presentations over the last year. And it's just so nice to see it all organized here and really hoping that everybody, you and the entire team, even folks who aren't here or virtual tonight, just take some pride. And, it's always good to sort of look back and get some perspective from the last year and where we were a year ago. And it's a lot of really amazing work. And so kudos.
Megan?
Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. And yeah, it was a lot of hard work. Thanks very much.
Thank you both. Thank you. I guess we'll move on to C, Superintendent's Evaluation. Presentation of evidence.
Yes. So I'm not going to go through every little bit of it, but I did prepare a brief slideshow just to kind of walk through the pieces that go into the superintendent's evaluation. And in years past, we've done it in a meeting. There have been times where it's been done in a workshop. So I think last year it was in a workshop. This is just kind of a high level overview and outline, which we did have a workshop about, and Elise, as the chair of the subcommittee, had talked about. So the superintendent's evaluation is based on these items: personal goals, professional practice goal, and a student learning goal. All educators who are evaluated under the Department of Education's evaluation system that was put in place probably about 10 years ago set 2 goals for themselves, and I do as well. The school committee has always afforded me the opportunity to narrow the superintendent's rubric into focus areas. And I have actually had the same focus areas for the past 5 years, based on self-reflection in terms of what I think to be the most important areas for superintendent, as well as the needs of the Franklin Public Schools. There are other areas in the rubric that might pertain to a different context. Specifically, curriculum and instruction, laws, ethics, and policies, fiscal systems, communication, and shared vision. In recent years, the Department of Education has issued focus indicators for districts to consider. Some districts kind of took it upon themselves to focus in on some indicators, and then those who didn't had an opportunity through the department to have focus indicators for educators. I think it's a great idea. The rubric is, I think there's like 20 something indicators, and each indicator has a couple different elements. So it can get really tedious if you don't kind of focus in. And then the district improvement goals. And I guess one of the things that I always am really transparent about is a recognition that the only way I do work as superintendent is with other people. And so it's really a team-based effort with other folks in the district to accomplish, in particular, the district improvement goals. So in terms of the district improvement goals, you just heard the district improvement plan update this evening.
Sure.
Thank you. I left this part of my packet over at the table. But I did do a self-assessment related to whether or not the district improvement goals were met or there's significant progress. I have kind of a nagging habit of being pretty ambitious in terms of setting the goals. So it's just a self-aware acknowledgement. And so I've got the first two having been met and the third and fourth one being listed as significant progress. I think district improvement plan goal number 4 in terms of significant progress, and this ties to one of my personal goals, was around the strategic plan, but kind of announcing my departure in January left me feeling like that would be better deferred to an incoming superintendent as part of the entry process to be thinking about a new strategic plan. And then in terms of high quality instruction, I'm trying to think of why I rated it the way I did, but I think there was more that, in my opinion, I would have liked to have done related to district improvement plan number 3. In terms of the professional practice goal, this one was related to collaboration and communication skills, and the professional practice and student learning goal were both intended to be 2-year goals. It was interesting to kind of take a look back at this goal, which was so focused on communicating in a virtual environment. And then fast forward to this year, things have really changed. I think we're kind of desperate and clamoring to be back to in-person environments with our teams and committees. But we are really trying to consider, when does a virtual environment lend itself to a meeting versus in person, and so. But also, like, what other communication and collaboration tools did we learn about through the pandemic and continue forward? I will say, to Lucas's point around returning to systems, communication is kind of an interesting one that I haven't 100% figured out where we are post-pandemic with communication. When the pandemic hit, the building shut down, communication really migrated out of the buildings to central office. And then with buildings opening back up, communication really migrated back to central office. But what is the role of communicating from the central office? And I think there's a stronger role than there had been previously. And so figuring out what those communication systems would be is something that I think can be evaluated going forward. So there's some updates there that I shared with you in some bullet points around various methods of communication through the year. And again, I'm not going to go through everything, but hopefully you see it tied to some of the evaluation comments and suggestions from the previous committee. The student learning goal I rated as met, and that was related to supporting social and emotional learning skills of students and staff. So you can see the action plans there. A lot of things are complementary with the district improvement plan. You will see a lot of overlap between those goals, but there's some additional pieces that are kind of specific to some things that I may have done that you wouldn't have had exposure to. I tried to do monthly casual coffees with faculty and staff and with families. I think the virtual environment was great. It did provide some measure of accessibility to those. It was very limited in terms of the number of people who attended, and so I had halted doing that. I do anticipate doing a final faculty coffee before the end of the year with the group. And we already talked about the superintendent's roundtable. We did not have a great turnout in January, we provided some time for the staff to complete a survey and did not meet kind of expectations there. So you may want to consider deferring an end of year survey. People are pretty overwhelmed at this point in time as we launch into the end of the year. Defer to the beginning of next year and incorporate an element of teacher and staff feedback in the next superintendent's entry process. Although we only had a 38% response rate, we did see an increase in the professional development satisfaction, which was nice to see. But because the response rate was so low, we didn't ultimately kind of publish the results. And so that was disappointing, but people did have a lot on their plates. It was January, COVID was high. And so I would suggest maybe revisiting that, having a conversation with FAA leadership, for example, and maybe understanding a little bit more about how best to gather some staff feedback. And then I'll just skip ahead. I know I'm going fast, but you have all of this to look at and are certainly invited. This is not, you don't just have to ask questions tonight. If there's anything that you want some follow-up on between now, within the next week or so, happy to provide you with additional information or clarification. In terms of the focus indicators, you can see some additional bullet points for each of them, including curriculum and instruction. Some of the things that weren't talked about was we meet with principals once or twice a month as a level-based team, and we typically focus those meetings on curriculum and instruction. And so that's been something that we started in the pandemic and have continued forward as a structure that I think has been really positive. And speaking of returning to previous systems, I resumed my school-based visits and did some walkthroughs. Went to ECDC today, which is always a highlight. And so resumed walkthroughs of classrooms. In terms of law, ethics, and policies, continue to support the policy subcommittee in your review of the bullying policy in particular and discrimination and harassment. I think notably the mask policy was something that we had to navigate through this year, and things that you heard me talk about but wouldn't have seen is consulting with health professionals and other districts to determine kind of the best course and trying to advise you in that direction, applying to the state for a waiver at the high school. And, you know, I want to thank Paula and the nursing team for gathering all of that vaccination data so that we can do that and provide a measure of relief to folks. Thank Paula too for the COVID testing, which I think has been just critical this year. It's just been critical to have that weekly testing. I think it's incredibly reassuring to people that we have that. Behind the scenes, supported the folks with the tiered focus monitoring review. I think I wanted to highlight that as a measure of determining our compliance with certain regulations from the state and federal government. And one of the things that I also wanted to bring up that you might not be aware about as a school committee is that whether it's a special education process or whether it's one of your policies like discrimination, harassment, bullying, there are appeal procedures for families who are discontent. And so as the superintendent, I'm in a position to support our team in providing documentation and supporting any of the complaints that may happen to agencies that exist to make sure that our practices are good. In terms of fiscal systems, I linked to the legislative advocacy letter there, and Miriam and I have kept you up to date on the budget. In terms of communication, I added a few things there related to our focus on communicating with families whose primary language is not English. We have made the interpretation services much more noticeable when you walk into school offices, for example. And I think that's a nice addition to the district. And we're currently exploring additional technology tools that's being spearheaded by our digital learning integrationist and Michelle Kingsland Smith, our ELD director. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is this last one in terms of shared vision around the portrait of a graduate. And it's continually referenced throughout the district. You saw it tonight. You've seen it in budget presentations, but it's making its way into classrooms too. And senior projects last night, it's very specific in the rubric. There's an expectation that the students are going to reflect on the work that they did in their senior project and point to how it connects to the portrait of a graduate and what skills specifically they developed while engaging in their internship project. And so to me, that's like full circle. I just get goosebumps. I think similarly, work is underway to do something equally or similarly powerful with respect to a shared vision around equity. So the foundation is laid with the equity statement, and there can be continued work to bring people together to make sure that each and every child is supported in the Franklin Public Schools. So happy to answer any questions now, but if there's specific questions or additional documentation you'd like to see, can provide it to you within the coming days.
Sure. Elise, I'd like to hand it over to you. I know that you're the chair of the
I
superintendent
am,
evaluation
so I just wanted
committee.
to chime in first. So all this information that Dr. Ahern just presented to us, that's what we're going to go through on our own. So we got sort of our primer here, and then we're going to go through our own individual data sheets, and you can make whatever notes you want to make. She did her own self-assessment here, but then we each do our own independent assessment as far as looking at, these ratings or looking at the rubrics over here. So this is an important document to have. You have it digitally and you have a hard copy here. And we have, the clock starts ticking now. So we have a little over a week, I'll call it. It's like a week and a half, but imagine a week, because as you get in there and you sit down, really, like for a deadline person, but when you sit down and you start looking through it, and there's a lot of links, like this isn't just like a 20-minute, just like scan through and circle. So this is like, you get in there, you click all the links, you have to be, very thoughtful. And, anyways, it's a fun and fascinating process. And again, I feel really reinforced and vicariously proud, I guess, or just to be going through and looking at all this amazing work like bottled up in one place. And so it's like a fun experience for me, which is why I like to be the chair of this committee. Anyway, so these need to be finished and go to D by June 3rd. So if your handwriting's messy, that's okay. And a hard copy is preferred. You can scan it and email it to her, or bring it in here, or mail it to her, or I can come get it at your house if you want. We'll make it as easy as we can. You got to get them all in.
June 3rd.
June 3rd, by June 3rd.
Yes.
Yes.
Not June 4th.
Anytime before June 3rd.
Not June 5th, June 3rd.
Anytime before June 3rd. And then I'll start to get a little nudgy, a little
She will.
naggy, a little naggy.
She really likes to hold this over her heads. All right, Camille, questions, comments?
No questions. I'll follow up if I have any. Thanks.
Dave Callahan?
Yes, I just, this is at least, just want to reiterate. So hard copy preferred.
June 3rd.
By close of business, June 3rd.
Graduation.
Yeah, that's graduation.
That's graduation date. So June 2nd.
June 2nd. Let's say June 2nd.
And to D.
To D Miller, yes.
Okay.
And she will keep them confidential until the subcommittee meets, and then we'll gather the hard copies and go through them in public meeting.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, Al.
No comment.
Dave, yeah.
Just a brief question. You mentioned, communication was like complicated, interesting during the pandemic. So like, what would you say was the most important or effective communication strategy for the progress that was made in that regard?
So I think that has less to do with me and more to do with Lily Rivera. I think that she is in the position, because Anne Marie Tracy before Lily did a tremendous job as well. But that position is so critical. It's increasingly being implemented in districts to have a marketing communications person. I meet with her weekly. She meets with our central office team weekly on the same day on Mondays, and we kind of plan our communications. And I think hands down, she's just an incredible person and has done tremendous work in her less than a year with us. And she just, again, Anne-Marie was amazing too. But I really want to give credit to the marketing and communications coordinator position as just being very, very high leverage in terms of our communications, and really synthesizing them. And I think she's got a vision too in terms of where she'd like to take it as well. And so that's the most effective. She's great.
Thank you. And just one last question. Having just done the self-assessment, what would you say is the most important goal for your successor to keep in mind in the coming year?
I think I might say the communication one too. I think we're still coming back from the pandemic. I've talked and thought a lot about students and student behavior, and there was a great Edutopia article that talked about students having experienced so-called broken belongings and coming back to school and desperately craving those relationships, but not fully navigating them with skills that they otherwise would have built in the intervening years. And I think in many ways, and you're seeing that kind of manifest in a variety of ways. And I think that I think adults are the same. And so we're kind of engaging in an entry process of communication in terms of listening. It's a great opportunity to come in and listen and bring people together around supporting the students. So I might say communication.
Thank you.
Well, I don't have any questions right now, but I don't know if I made it clear that as you're reviewing all the information, if you have questions, just email Dr. Hernan. She can send you follow-up documents or whatever you need.
June 2nd.
Yes.
I put it in for June 1st.
June 2nd.
Perfect.
Yeah, just-
I finished mine. Can I give it?
So June 3rd, midnight?
No.
No,
She'll be at your house.
no questions. Thank you.
Okay. I think we are all set with guests and presentations.
Great. I'll return to my seat. Very log out. Yeah.
So Dr. Hearn, for discussion action items, if you'd like, will go ahead with A. Sure. Okay. I recommend approval of a 3-year contract with Mr. Lucas Chigier as Superintendent of Franklin Public Schools, beginning July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. I will accept a motion at this time to approve the 3-year contract with Mr. Lucas Chigier as discussed.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Discussion, questions? I'll go down. Camille?
No.
No. Al? No. Dave?
No.
Elise? No. Megan?
No questions.
Okay. Seeing none, vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Okay. Next on the agenda is a policy for second reading and adoption. I recommend adoption of policy ADF, the wellness policy, for as discussed.
Okay. Is there a motion to adopt policy ADF, wellness policy as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion, questions? All right, seeing none, vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Dr. Hearn?
Okay, so we have some, speaking of returning to systems and things that existed pre-pandemic, we have some trips for your consideration and hopefully approval. The distinction that we make is that if it's a recurring trip, one that happens every year, we put it in the consent agenda. These other ones are not recurring. They're kind of new initiatives. And we thank the people who put them forward. So So the first one is boys basketball trip. I recommend approval of the request of CJ Neely, who's our coach, to take the boys basketball team to Orlando, Florida from December 26th through 30th, 2022 to participate in the 2022 KSA Events Basketball Tournament as detailed. This is over winter break and would not necessitate any school being missed.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the request of CJ Neely to take the boys basketball team to Orlando, Florida from December 26th through December 30th, 2022 to participate in the 2022 KSA events as detailed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion, questions? I'm just gonna look from now on. No. All right. Seeing none, vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries.
Great. The next trip is for April vacation. I recommend approval of the request of Diane Poof to take students to Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida from April 15th to 19th, 2023 to perform as detailed.
Okay. I recommend approval of the request of Diane Poof to take students to Walt Disney World in Orlando, Florida from April 15th to April 19th, 2023 as detailed.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Any discussion, questions? Nope. All right. Vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carries. I think Diane can log off. I've been watching her patiently.
And this last trip, I know Josh Hanna is actually in support of all of these. These don't come to you without his initial approval, and then mine is a return to more international travel as an educational experience. We had two successful trips, or one pre-pandemic. I think it was one. Our second trip was planned during the pandemic, and we had to cancel that. But this trip is coming to us related to Spain, a language-based trip. And I recommend approval of the request of Emily Chasen and Laura Keenan to take students to Malaga and Granada, Spain from April 14th through 22nd, 2023. April 14th is a Friday. It is a early release day. And my anticipation is that this is probably a late night flight. Typically, that's how EF would schedule it. It's not definite, not set in stone, but I think that any impact to a school day would actually be probably pretty limited. And so I recommend approval of the trip.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the Spain trip as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion, questions?
Yes, I see Ms. Keenan is on the call, and I think you need another chaperone, and I'd be happy to volunteer.
I know.
Laura's my friend.
No. We follow each other on Twitter. I'm already going to ask her.
I've known her since my children were babies.
All right, you in.
We play bingo with the old ladies.
So old. All right. Dave, Aaron, Dave.
I'd just like to say, I think it's wonderful that we're having these opportunities for our students. And having lived abroad myself for a few years, it's so enriching and eye-opening when I'm able to go and just see other cultures. And it's fantastic that we allow our students this opportunity. So yeah, excellent.
I'll report back when I get back.
How's your Spanish?
Donde está la biblioteca? 5 years of Spanish right there.
I think the whole school committee should go as a chaperone.
I agree. All right. So seeing no more discussion questions, vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Laura, have fun.
Great. And then lastly, in the discussion action items is a proposed MASC resolution that is coming to you for formal consideration, for your consideration to send it for, I'm mangling this, for formal consideration by the 2022 Mass Association of School Committees Delegate Assembly in November. And so I recommend that, do we need to read it?
I have a whole.
You want to read it?
I was going to explain how the delegate assembly works. And
okay, you want me to? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll read this and then you can discuss after the motion. I recommend that the school committee adopt the proposed MASC resolution regarding sanctuary laws for trans students for formal consideration by the 2022 Massachusetts Association of School Committees Delegate Assembly in November as discussed.
Is there a motion to approve the proposed MASC resolution as discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. So I just wanted to kind of briefly explain the process to our new colleagues, or even to Elise, because I know we didn't really do this much in our first term. So Franklin is a member of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. So every November, we send a delegate to the MASC Delegate Assembly. The Delegate Assembly sets priorities for the organization for the year, which effectively means that every school committee in Massachusetts is together saying, this is something we believe is important and we would like your support on. And it's powerful when it comes to things like working with our state legislators. If 5 school committees in Massachusetts in 2 regions pass the same language before the 1st of June, it automatically goes to the Delegate Assembly for consideration in November. So I've worked with some of our colleagues on other school committees to put together the attached language. I know many have been concerned by the bias and hate that is currently being put into laws for students who are transgender across the country. I can't fix the laws in other states. However, I can advocate for better laws in my own. So what we've done here, we're advocating for Massachusetts to pass sanctuary laws, following along with Connecticut, California, and 17 other states who've proposed sanctuary laws as well. Essentially, what this does is create a safe haven for students and their families who live in other states. So what is this resolution? What this resolution does is it shows the Delegate Assembly in November, which will have a representative from every school committee in the state, that we would want this to be one of the priorities for what they advocate for at the State House in the coming year. Effectively, we're saying the protection of transgender children is so important that we believe the state should be putting this forward as a priority. So I wanted to go ahead and read the resolution so everyone knows what it is we're considering. The language is as follows. Whereas the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has a long history of standing for civil rights, including advocacy for a Bill of Rights in the U.S. Constitution, and whereas Massachusetts codified gender identity as a protected class in the 2001 Act relative to gender identity, and whereas all children deserve a safe environment in which to grow up, whereas some state governments are now criminalizing supportive medical care for trans individuals, moving to bar families from traveling to access such care, and otherwise violating the civil rights of trans children and their families. And whereas the defense of the civil rights of the historically marginalized is contained within the first article of the Massachusetts Constitution right of seeking and obtaining their safety and happiness. Therefore, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees call on the Great and General Court to join with other states in the passage of so-called sanctuary laws to ensure such children and their families have the power of enjoying in safety and tranquility their natural rights and the blessings of life as guaranteed by the Constitution of the Commonwealth. So once we have 10 other school districts that have approved this, I know that there are several already have, it'll go automatically to our delegate assembly in November, where all members of the school committee districts will vote on whether or not to pass it and to support it at the state level. So I guess now that I've done my little spiel, are there any discussion questions from the committee before we?
No, just complete and utter full support.
Dave? No? Dave? Please? Thank you.
Just complete full support too.
All right, so seeing no more discussion questions, vote will come on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you guys very much. All right, discussion only items, Dr. Ahern. I see none.
None.
All right, information matters. Let's see. Superintendent evaluation, Elise.
I can repeat everything I said
June
if anybody
2nd.
needs a refresher. Just let me know if you need. I can just send you a text.
June 2nd. Budget.
Budget has not met since last time. And we don't have a meeting scheduled yet. However, tomorrow, for those who cannot get enough of school budget, which I'm sure is many watching, we will be presenting our proposed budget at the town council. So I'm sure everyone looks forward to that, and we look forward to doing that.
Perfect. Policy, Dave Callahan.
Yeah, we have not met since our last meeting. We have one on June 8th. That's 5 days after the superintendent evaluations are due.
Yeah.
And we'll have more updates at the next meeting.
Wait, is it June 8th?
June 8th.
Okay. Community relations. Our next meeting is Tuesday, May 31st, where we'll be discussing our upcoming social event, Saturday, June 4th from 1 to 3 p.m. You can find a few of us at Birchwood Bakery. Also, we will be hosting a booth, as we've done in the past, at the Strawberry Stroll, June 10th, beginning at 4 p.m. Please come visit us at both events, and we look forward to seeing you guys. What are you laughing at? You want to come?
Like the please come visit.
Please come visit us. We like seeing people.
I mean, they'll be there for the strawberry.
I
shortcake.
can't wait. Strawberry shortcake. All right. Space needs and facilities. Yeah.
So our next meeting is on June 6th. We'll be talking about the action items from the previous meeting and reviewing the draft version of the presentation that'll be on the 14th.
Joint PCC.
Again, so the last meeting of the school year was yesterday. We spoke about, Mr. Jigger talked about the anti-bullying policy, and the PCCs provided us an end of year update for what will happen. So things such as the field days, 5th grade events, family gatherings, things of that nature, just to close out the year and really just have a nice end to the school year.
School Wellness Advisory Council, Elise?
We don't have any more meetings for the rest of the year, but you can look for SWAC representatives at the Franklin Farmers Market this summer.
Okay. Make that note. CPAC.
CPAC, our next meeting is Thursday, June 9th.
Substance Abuse Task Force, Lucas?
We haven't met since the last school committee meeting that we're taking a break, and there's no other update for that right now.
Okay. And DEI committee, our final meeting of the year is tomorrow, May 25th. Looking forward to it. All right. Consent agenda, Dr. Ahern.
Okay. If you want anything held for discussion, just say hold. Otherwise, go read them. I recommend approval of the minutes from the May 10th, 2022 school committee meeting as detailed. I recommend approval of the budget transfers as detailed. I recommend acceptance of the following gifts totaling $3,171.04 for Franklin High School, $2,524.66 from Shutterfly LLC for supplemental supplies, $64.38 from Ohio Pile Prints, Inc. for supplemental supplies, $402 from Massachusetts Agriculture in the Classroom, Inc. for supplemental supplies, $30 from Colleen Bond for in-house enrichment, and $150 from Paula Morano for scholarship. I recommend acceptance of 2 checks totaling $905 from the Parmenter PCC for field trips as detailed. I recommend acceptance of a check for $1,875 from the JFK PCC for field trips as detailed. And I recommend approval of the request of Brad Hendrickson for 66 second grade students to travel to Roger Williams Zoo in Providence, Rhode Island on May 31st, 2022 as detailed.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as detailed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion, questions? No, please. All right. Nope. All right, seeing none, vote will come in the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda. All set?
All set.
Okay, citizens' comments. Are there any citizens in the audience, in person or online, who would like to make a comment on an item not on tonight's agenda and falls within the committee's purview? Just go ahead and raise your hand or wave. You can just see for people. No.
I don't see anyone.
All right. New business, Dr. Ahern.
Okay, at the next meeting, which is June 14th, we will have some students joining us to share their civics projects from 8th grade in the middle schools. So that is exciting. We have the superintendent evaluation, following that timeframe. And space needs presentation coming from the space needs subcommittee, and also a vote to present to you for consideration related to Davis Thayer and declaring it as surplus and turning it over to the town. And the space needs presentation Al had referred to. We had at one point talked about the Metro West Youth Risk Behavior Survey, as well as the equity audit. The equity audit's not going to be ready in time to present, so that's going to have to be deferred. And the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, we talked with the chair and talked internally around waiting for the full report. I think that way you have some of the actions kind of rolling into next year in place, kind of ready for implementation. So, because it's a pretty ambitious agenda, and so trying to pace some things out. So that's what you can expect at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so finally, we will be adjourning to executive session and not returning to an open meeting. Okay, so my favorite part, reading all this. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the FEA-RN unit as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the school committee, and the chair so declares. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to discuss strategy in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel. Is there a motion to adjourn into executive discussion as discussed? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Camille?
Yes.
Dave Callahan?
Yes.
Al Charles?
Yes.
Dave McNeil?
Yes.
Ellie Stokes?
Yes.
Noah Whitmore?
Yes.
Nate Spencer, yes. All right, thank you, everyone. See you again on June